Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 86, Hurricane Fran. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Disappointed by Maxwell's unwillingness to make a commitment, Fran decides that she is going to take a holiday vacation separate and apart from the Sheffields. She and Val go to the Caribbean, but instead of a relaxing beach vacation, they get hit by a hurricane. Sylvia demands Maxwell explain to her precisely why he hasn't married her daughter yet, which would have kept her safe at home. Fran and Val survive the storm, and Fran agrees to go on the family's vacation. Meanwhile, Cece, in an effort to eavesdrop on a private conversation between Fran and Maxwell, slipped on the recently waxed floor and broke her leg, allowing Niles to torture her more easily. Bernadette, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not.
All right. The only thing I think I actually want to add is that this is one of those clip shows. So we're going to be looking backwards an awful lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we open up this episode in the kitchen. Niles is there. Fran is coming in. And as she comes in, she's asking where her tropical getaway brochure is. And then we notice that the kids are all sitting at the table. And Brighton has the tropical getaways brochure. And Fran's like, B, you didn't have to take it. I was going to donate it to the library under your mattress. And he's like, oh, is this not my trig book?
Right.
And again, Maggie is not impressed with Brighton's attempt to cover. And she says, guys, really say stupid things or something along those lines. And Fran's like, this coming from the girl who said she got whisker burn from kissing my mother. And Maggie's like, that really happened. And Fran's like, okay, I'll give that to you.
Right.
So Cece now appears and is saying how she wishes she could get away, but she has so much work to do. And Niles, pouring a glass of some alcohol of sorts, is like, cheers, gotta keep that nose so bright. Won't you drive that slave tonight?
Right.
And Maxwell, meanwhile, is kind of laughs at the joke and then kind of coughs to cover it up when Cece gives him a look. So this is when we learn that Fran is going on a separate vacation from the Sheffields. And Gracie asks, why are you going? And Fran's like, well, when there's someone who's not willing to commit, and of course, that's a pointed jab at Maxwell, who's standing right there. But she basically is spending her money that would have been for her trousseau on a lot of Bahama Mamas.
Yep.
And again, Gracie is like, oh, I understand, it makes sense if you two aren't dating or married and Fran's like, okay, stop babbling, sweetie. And Gracie goes off. So Maxwell again is still kind of stuck on this whole thing of Fran going on a different vacation, and he mentions, because Fran's like, well, if you had anything better, and he's like, well, I was thinking of chartering a yacht and taking a tour in the Greek islands. And at this point, Cece and Niles are standing behind the counter, just like avidly listening in. And so Fran and Maxwell decide they need to have a private conversation, and Cece and Niles pretend that they weren't listening in. So right. Fran and Maxwell get up and leave the room. And of course, Cece starts making a dash for the swinging door. Niles is like, whoa, Nelly, like, how dare you, essentially like calling her out for wanting to eavesdrop. And Cece points out that, in her words, Niles posed for the RCA dog poster, and she makes this like thing as if he's like listening in. And so anyway, so she makes a beeline for the door, and Niles kind of calls out after her, trying to say, I just, and then we hear a shriek, some glass breaking, and then Niles finishes, wax the floor.
Correct.
So, yes, in this opening scene, we're establishing that Fran is going on the separate vacation, and this is where Cece breaks her leg. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not.
Okay, will you take us to the office?
Sure. So, as we've already established, Fran and Maxwell were going to have a private conversation, so they went to the office by themselves. And Maxwell is trying to understand why Fran suddenly has decided to take a separate vacation. And Fran's like, but what is the big deal? It's not like we're one of those needy codependent couples that have to spend every waking moment with each other, right? And then he starts walking. She's like, wait, where are you going? And he's like, look, I just think that the holidays are a time for us all to be together, like one big, warm, happy family. And he sits down, or warm, loving family. He sits down next to her, and she's like, well, I've got news for you. A warm, loving family requires a legally binding certificate registered with the state and Pottery Barn. Besides, and she like gets up and is like looking at him, what is this unnatural obsession with you not wanting me to take a vacation by myself? And he's like, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And she's like, oh no. And here's where we get the first, flashback, and it's to the episode A Ship of Fran's. And it's where she and Maxwell are talking about how Maxwell's decided to take Brighton, the whole family, on a Caribbean cruise to celebrate Brighton's confirmation. So it's a big bar mitzvah like to do. And she finds out that they're going on the cruise with her when she was supposed to go on a singles cruise.
Mm-hmm.
And Max was like, well, he doesn't have a good answer to her. And she's like, well, why can't you just be honest? The reason you don't want me going on a vacation alone is because you're terrified that I'm going to meet someone. And she's like, you've always been sabotaging my dates. And he's like, that's ridiculous. Every one of your dates I've been on, I behaved like a perfect gentleman, which is just a ridiculous concept when you think about it. Mm-hmm. And so we flip back to, again, A Ship of Fran's, and we see Fran, Steve Goodman, and Maxwell are, standing there, and Steven says to Maxwell, you're welcome to join us. And Fran gives him and he starts to say, oh, well, that sounds like, as if he's going to say, sounds great. But then Fran looks at him and he's like, oh, terribly inconvenient. I couldn't possibly. Good night. And she's like, oh, are you sure? And he's like, well, actually, and she gives him another death glare. And like, that's the end of that. And then we have a scene from An Offer She Can't Refuse, where Maxwell's asking about Tony Chatori's limo. What kind of car does he drive? It's a limo, a town car. No, stretch. It's enormous. Bigger than mine. Oy, she says, if it's so important to you, whip yours out of the garage and we'll have a limo measuring contest. And so we're now back in the office, and Max was like, all right, fine. Take your vacation to some tacky resort with its tequila shooter night. And oh yes, the big Macarena marathon. And Fran's like, well, for your information, this place happens to be nothing like that. It's very classy. Oh, look. And she's like looking at the brochure. They've got a strip limbo contest. And Maxwell looks at the picture and asks, if that touches, is he disqualified? And Fran's like, well, maybe from the contest, and walks out. Do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
Then please take us to paradise.
Yes, so we are in paradise with Val and Fran. And so they're, looking around. It's so great. And then we see a handsome young man. Hola, ladies, and welcome. And his name is Rico. And he has their bags. So he gestures for them to go into the little, they have their own little kind of guest house. Like, I don't know how you'd phrase it.
It's like, I want to call it a cabin or a cabana, maybe.
Yeah. Like, it's, again, one of those kind of separate beach house kind of things, but, small. Like, it's not a huge house or anything. But anyway, he gestures them to go in, and Fran explains to him, well, in America, where we're from, the men go first. And so, of course, they take that opportunity to check him out. And Fran says, God bless America. And Val's like, see, aren't you glad you came with me? If you were with Max, Mr. Sheffield, you wouldn't be able to flirt with Rico, with Mr. Sheffield dancing. And smearing you with baby oil, taking you to cocktails at sunset. Fran gets this look on her face. You know, Val, this is why my mother never wanted me to hang out with you or play with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go into some flashbacks.
Yes.
So I'm not as good at identifying the name of the episode, but we're back in the episode where Fran gets it in her head that she needs to paint that billboard as a Valentine to
It's,
Maxwell.
it's love is a many blunder thing.
Okay. And so this is the scene in that episode where Fran and Val, like, go up to paint, but then they realize, oh, the paint's still at the bottom. And of course, this is Val's fault in Fran's eyes. And they're like, okay, we'll go back down and grab it. Release it on the count of three. And then Val releases it, tips over. Val falls out. Fran is hanging by the rope.
Yep.
Then we cut to another scene from another episode.
Actually,
Again.
same episode.
Oh, same episode. Okay. This is where they're at the bus stop and it's super crowded. So Val's like worried about whether they can get on the bus. And Fran's like, don't worry about it. And she starts talking loudly. Can you believe that gorgeous 2-bedroom apartment on the corner? Only $400 a month. And of course, everybody perks up and starts like running in that direction. Fran's very proud of herself and it's like, you see that, Val? What kind of idiot? And then, of course, she has to call out for Val because Val believed it as well.
Yep.
And then we go to another scene. And this is when Val and Fran got an apartment together.
Yep. The title was Val's Apartment.
Yes. And this is where like Val screams because there's a cockroach, they're freaking out. And Fran's like, take off your shoe. And so Val takes her shoe off and then with her bare foot smushes the cockroach.
Correct.
So again, that's the end of the flashback sequence. And we get back to paradise and they're both saying how the breeze is just fabulous. And, Fran's like, oh, let's get in there, get out of our bulky clothes. And I need to note that they're in bathing suits, or at least Fran is. They're not in bulky clothing. But it is then that we hear an announcement that there's a small tropical depression headed toward the island. So there's going to be free cocktails in the hotel pavilion. And of course, Fran and Val get excited about free cocktails, but then almost immediately a branch falls. And then we hear over the intercom again, okay, that's canceled.
Right.
So it is the beginning of the hurricane. Do you have anything to add?
I'll just note that after the very large branch fell and the cocktails were canceled, then additional leaves and stuff started falling.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, let's get in.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I'll take us back to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia arrives at the Sheffield home and she's talking to Maxwell. A terrible hurricane is going to hit the island that Franny is on. My baby's going to die. And he like reaches out and like pats her arm and says, Sylvia, and she's like, hold me, don't be such a Gentile. And she like forces him to hug her. And he's like, Sylvia, I know, I've heard, but it's all going to be all right. Come on. Like, and he's like, and she's like, clearly still very worked up. And she sits down on the couch and she's like, it's times like this that you look up to God and you ask, why? And he's like, well, now we can't ask why, Sylvia, it's nature, it's random. And she's like, no. Why don't you marry my daughter? She'd be home safe with us right now. And he's like, now, Sylvia, I appreciate that you're upset, but I prefer not to discuss something that's really between Miss Fine and myself. And she's like, well, make an exception. How often am I here? Which of course kicks off another set of flashbacks. And the first one is to the episode Me and Mrs. Joan. And we see Sylvia and Yetta walking in and Maxwell commenting, well, here they are, Naomi and Winona. Then we have a scene from Val's apartment where Sylvia, Fran's in her very fancy long nightgown, and Sylvia asks Niles, who's in his nightshirt, do I smell banana fritters with fresh fruit compote? And he's like, no. And she's like, well, could I? And then the last the last flashback in the sequence is from Where's the Pearls, where Fran opens the hall closet and sees her mother's head sticking out from behind all the coats. And so she's forced to introduce Elizabeth Taylor to her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And Sylvia makes that comment that this meeting bestows an honor upon me, which is unparalleled within my universe. And then they take the pearls. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to take us back to paradise?
Yes. So Val is outside
Yeah.
on, a lounge chair, and she's wrapped up in like a long towel slash blanket like thing, and she's
Yeah.
like shivering. There's a thunderstorm. The wind is wild, as becomes very apparent as Fran is trying to walk towards Val to sit next to her, and she's carrying 2 drinks. And suffice it to say, there's like not much drink left by the time she makes it. And she puts down the 2 glasses and she just licks her hand. She's like, I told them no salt. And for a second, the wind stops. So they immediately, like, she whips off her cover, like, Val takes off the towel slash blanket, and they try to get some sun, but almost immediately it's back to cloudy, stormy. And Fran's asking, did I get anything? As in sun exposure.
Right.
And, Val starts to say, this is like a real hurricane. And Fran's like, calm down, Val. But they decide to kind of head back in because it is super windy. And Fran's like, we just need to tie us to something sturdy. And of course, Rico walks by at that point. So Fran kind of clings on to him. This'll do.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
Okay, take us back to the Sheffield residence.
All right. So, where we now see that Cece has broken her leg. She's in a electric wheelchair, and she's complaining to Niles that if he hadn't waxed the floor, this never would have happened. And he's like, oh, come on, don't be such a baby. You're really getting the hang of it. Yes, she's not. As we see, she's trying to like maneuver it, but she keeps hitting herself into things. And she complains that she's hungry. And he's like, well, it's your own fault for not showing up for lunch. And she's like, but I was waiting in the dining room for hours. And he's like, but I served upstairs in the solarium. Why didn't you? Oh. And she's like, you wouldn't be able to torture me like this if I wasn't in this chair. And he very snarkily says, but you are, Babs. You are. And then we have our next set of flashbacks, which prove that he would be able to torture her, whether she had a broken leg or not. The first one, I believe, is from Dope Diamond, where he asks her if she wants coffee, and she says, yes, please. And he, instead of handing her a cup of coffee, hands her the hot coffee pot. We then have a scene from A Fine Family Feud, where Cece's trying to go get the birthday present for Maggie for her Sweet 16 for Maxwell. And she comments that it's ridiculous. I don't know why that stupid store doesn't deliver. And he's like, oh, they do. Oh, and she walks out, and she's walked out. Oh dear, I wonder if I can catch her. Miss Babcock. He doesn't get her, obviously. And then, of course, the piece de resistance, the scene from Pen Pal, where Cece thinks that she's going to seduce Maxwell, and Niles opens the door and dims the light, and she asks, Maxwell, darling, is that you? And he doesn't say anything, then blows on her ear. And he says, oh, don't turn around. Then he blows on her ear, and she says, I'm yours. Tell me what you want me to do. And he gets that great look on his face and then says, cluck like a chicken. What? It turns me on. And anyway, it's one of the most iconic scenes in the entire series in my mind. So back to the present day in the Sheffield home, and Cece's annoyed at him, wants him out of her way, but then turns out the electric wheelchair is stuck. And so she starts shouting, oh, Niles, oh God, this thing is stuck. How do I stop it? And he's like, oh, hold on, I'll get the manual. He picks up the manual, opens it. From off screen, we hear Maxwell ask Niles if he's busy. And Niles tosses the manual and says, "Free as a bird, sir," and walks away, leaving
Mm-hmm.
Cece to scream after him, "Niles!"
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
she's also going in a circle in the chair.
Correct. The one thing I want to add is I don't think we've ever or will ever see the solarium. So it's one of those instances where the house is magical.
Yes.
So
Yes.
would you like to take us to the office?
Yes. So Maxwell's in his office and he's been listening to the radio with the updates on the hurricane. He clicks it off as Niles comes in and he says to Niles that he's awfully worried. What if she dies? And Niles is like, "Oh, I'll feed her eventually. I'm just screwing with her head." And Maxwell's like, "I'm talking about Miss Fine, not Cece.
Right.
Um, she'll never know how I feel about her. No one knows." And Niles goes, "No one knows. Hello." And that kicks off some flashbacks. Again, can't say the title.
I
Do you have the
can.
title?
I
Okay.
do. The first one is Fashion Show.
Yes, because this is when Maxwell is like very worried because in that episode, he gave the job of the costuming to Fran. And so he's worried about how they're going to turn out. Have I been caught up in my feeling? Like, is that why he picked her to do it? And Niles that in that episode is like, "What feelings?" And Maxwell's like, and Miles like, "No, like I'd like, if maybe if you say it out loud." Um, and then that's when he's about to say his feelings, I believe, right?
Yep.
And then there's knock knock, and it's Fran coming in, and like Niles has a breakdown. Oh, like, "Oh, what?" Or "Wait. Oh,
Wait.
wait." Yeah. "Oh, wait." Um, and yeah, he's not happy. And then there's then the next scene.
Which is from Green Card.
Yes. And so my notes are a little hard to decipher here. Do you mind helping me out a little bit on
Sure.
that flashback?
Sure. So Maxwell is asking Niles, why is Fran throwing herself at that guy anyway? It's not like she's never seen a good-looking man before. I've been known
Yeah.
to turn a few heads in my time, right, Niles? And Niles says,
"You're a brick house."
"Mighty,
Yes.
mighty."
Mighty, mighty. And then we then jump to another flashback. Do you
Yep,
have
this
the
one
title to that
I
one?
do. This is from Your Feet's Too Big.
And again, like this is where like Maxwell's talking to Niles, trying to figure out how he can cheer up Miss Fine. And and Niles is just like, "You're a man. She's a woman." And in the meantime, he like pulls out of the drawer of the desk like some cologne, sprays it on Maxwell. Um, even has like some uh mouth freshener. What's it called?
Breath spray, I guess.
Yes, thank you. And like Maxwell opens his mouth and sprays it in. And so Niles is basically trying to like ready him up and then reminds him, like, just think, what would Pierce Brosnan do? And then like kind of pushes him out of the office. Do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay, take us back to paradise.
Well, it's no longer looking so paradisey at this point.
Yeah.
It's more just
Mm-hmm.
dicey.
Yep.
So we
Good
have,
one.
thank you, thank you. I try. This is why you keep me around. So we now see Fran and Val. They're in their little, guest cottage or whatever, and they're playing like light charades.
It's shadow puppets.
Shadow puppets. Thank you. I'm like, I know there's a word for this. And Val's just like using her fingers and thumb to like make like a talking, like
Yeah.
just flapping. Anyway, and Fran's like, "I don't know, Val." "Oh, all right, it's Seal of Ward from Sisters." And Val's like, "Yes, you are so good." And
Mhm.
Fran decides that, you know what she's going to do. She's going to call the family at home and let them know they're okay. And she whips out of her bag what Val identifies as Mr. Sheffield's phone. Oh, Mr. Sheffield gave you his phone? And Fran's like, gave, fell in my purse. Who remembers? And then, you know, we see that the room is sort of shaking, and Fran basically hops into bed with Val, and she's like, Val, the roof is going to cave in. We're going to die. And Val's like, well, shouldn't our life be flashing before our eyes? And Fran says, Val, we're over 30, single and in bed with each other. What life? Those poor children, they're going to be lost without my love and attention. And so we start another set of flashbacks. The first one is from I've Got a Secret, where Gracie's asking Fran, who was snooping on the secret house guest, do you know who it is yet? And Fran's like, well, honey, what did I tell you about snooping? And Gracie's like, that there should always be a lookout. And Fran's like, good, go wait in the hall. And Gracie's like, right. The second one is from the Rosie show fairly recently, where Fran sees Maggie trying to put some makeup on her neck. And Fran's like, a hickey, Maggie. Did you really think you were going to hide a hickey from me with a little pressed powder? You need oil-based concealer. And then the third one is from Fran Light, where we see little Brighton talking to Fran about how, you know, just forget it. It's too humiliating. And Fran's like, well, what could be so humiliating about being smaller in the locker room? And then she realizes. And then the last one, I believe, is from A Fine Friendship, where Niles announces that Master Willie has arrived with his nanny, and Fran tells Gracie to make an entrance and check yourself like I taught you. And Gracie raises one arm, I think, but then the other, and sniffs and says, I'm fine. And then leaves. And then we're back to Dicey, the Dicey Caribbean, and we see that the roof has caved in, and Fran and Val are sitting together, soaking wet. Their hair is dripping, and the rain is coming in through the now missing roof. And Fran's like, you know what? I am never coming back to this place again. I ordered room service half an hour ago. Do you see a fajita? Yeah, because that's the problem with the place.
Yep.
All right. Would you like to take us back to New York?
Yes. So we're back in New York, and Maxwell is eagerly looking out the window. And then he quickly runs, hops over the couch, and settles in just in time for Fran to walk in with her suitcase. And she comes in, and she, you know, with a fond kind of smile, goes over to the couch, gazes down. Get up. I saw you through the window.
Exactly.
And then, of course, we have this next part where Fran and Maxwell are talking at the same time. So at the same time, Maxwell was talking about having separate vacations was a horrible idea. Fran saying, yeah, like separate vacations was a lousy idea. At the same time, Maxwell saying, I missed you dreadfully. Fran saying, I had a terrible time. At the same time, Maxwell says, I'm so glad you're back. Fran's like, let's never do this again. And then together, simultaneously, they go, what? Nothing.
Right.
And so Maxwell goes on and says, you know, the fact is you're safe and we're all together for the holidays. And Fran's like, yes, and I am never leaving home again. Unless, you know, you're in mood to, you know, charter that, you know, yacht in Greece. And then they start to reminisce, you know, Maxwell's like, oh, this is 4 Christmases together. And we flash back to the very first episode where Maxwell's asking to see Fran's resume, and he's looking at, is this crayon? It's lipstick. and again, just as a reminder to our listeners, the very first episode, the setting is different. The Sheffield living room's slightly different, and everybody looks like such a baby.
Because they are.
Yeah. So anyway, we have that whole kind of scene where Brighton even stands up. I hate her. And Fran's like, I haven't even begun to sing, you know, Climb Every Mountain. And then Maxwell's like, You have a recommendation from the Queen Mother? What? Let me see. Oh, that's my mother from Queens.
Right.
Anyway, end of flashback. We're back here, and Fran's like, yeah, and I'm still only 2 years older. Um, and she goes on to say, how she's been quite a professional. So of course, what?
I said, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm
Okay, so
encouraging.
yeah, so we flash back, and
It's from
again, my first one, yeah, if you want to say it.
a fine friendship.
Mm-hmm. And can you, because again, a little indecipherable, the first one.
Sure. So we're in Fran's bedroom, and Fran is wearing does not have a shirt on, but she's wearing a bra and her black leggings,
Ah,
and
yes. Mhm.
says to Maxwell, while you're here, tell me, should I take this back? And his response is, I think you should put it on. And she's like, oh, I already had it on. It flattened down my, oh, Mr. Sheffield, why didn't you say anything? He's like, I didn't notice. And she's like, you didn't, I'm beginning to wonder about you too. And then she like tries to like pull it on over her hair. And she's like, I can't get it on. I'm stuck. Help me, help me. And he's like, relax, Miss Fine, we'll get it on. And she's like, oh, Mr. Sheffield, I'm so hot. And of course, I think at this point, Niles peers in and
Yeah.
he's like, I can't do this standing up. Let's get on the bed. And he like pushes her on the bed and he's straddling her and he pulls off her shirt and he looks up, holding her shirt over his head. And that's when he sees Niles, who says, if you let me tell Miss Babcock about this, I'll work free for a year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we go to another flashback. This time it's at Maggie's Sweet 16 at Aunt Frida's. And this is right after like the food fight where Fran is like covered in cake. And she's kind of like acting as if she's gonna, push some cake into Maxwell's face. And she's like, oh, I'm not gonna do that. She puts it down. Um, friend, or something like that. And he's like, oh, okay. And then she pulls him into a hug and just starts rubbing her body all against him so that he too is covered in
Correct.
food. And then we have the
From
flashback
girls.
where they're in the bathtub, the very large bathtub, and they're just like splashing each other in the bathtub. And of course, Niles, comes in again and gets ideas. But we come back and Fran's like, but you know what my favorite memory of all the memories is? And we go to a scene and Fran is in her bridal gown and Maxwell's in a tux and they're in front of a rabbi. And the rabbi says, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Mazel Tov. And they kiss. And then we come back and Max is like, that never happened. And he walks away. And then Fran turns to the camera, looks at the audience, says, I threw that one in for you guys. Happy holiday. And she walks off.
Correct.
Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I do not.
Okay, what about the credit scene?
So I believe it's just a voiceover at first.
Yes.
We see like we're looking at a boat, a ship, I should say, perhaps a yacht even. And we hear Fran saying, Niles, I got you invited to Greece. Why can't you just relax and enjoy it? And he's like, well, I'm sorry, but I can't help feeling that I left something on in the kitchen. We cut to the Sheffield kitchen and there's Cece in her electric wheelchair, still spinning, unable to get to the manual to figure out how to stop.
And
that's the episode.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Is there anything?
Yeah, I was going to say, is there anything you want to discuss before we get into the shticks?
I'm good if you are.
I'm good as well.
All right, let's talk about some fashion. Did you have a favorite outfit? And correct me if I'm wrong, we're only going to talk about the actual episode, not the flashbacks.
Yes, correct.
Excellent.
Correct. So we don't actually have a ton to work with because it's basically what Fran wore in the opening scenes, then kind of what she wore in Paradise, and then what she wore coming back, right?
Yeah.
So again, I mean, I think she looks great in the bathing suit. It's more of a fuller top, I would say.
Well, so I think we need to talk about her bathing suits
Mm-hmm.
because like when we first get to paradise, you described what she was wearing as a bathing suit, but I didn't necessarily think that was a bathing suit. So I'm not sure if you're talking about that or the actual bathing suit when she tried sunbathing for that like 5 seconds where there was sun.
Oh, okay. Because let me like, can you describe both? Because like I was thinking of where when they first got there.
So when they
Was
first
I?
got
Or
there,
when they were big. I don't know anymore.
and then of course there's what she and Val are wearing when the roof caves in. So like they're three
Mm-hmm.
paradise outfits. So when they first got there, Fran is wearing a leopard or some animal print, and it has like a skirt that's very short, and then it's like I want to call it like a bralette, but so like it covers her breasts, and then it has like short sleeves, but like most of her chest and all of her stomach are totally exposed. So that's what she's wearing when they get to paradise. Then for the like 5 seconds of sun, that's where she has frankly a more conservative top. So there she's wearing a bikini that's black and red, and it's sort of like a halter top, and it like covers her entire chest like below the breast line and then up.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's
I
has
think
like,
that was what I was referring to, I think, maybe.
okay, then yes, I like that as well. She looked fantastic in that. I did not like the leopard print.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't the leopard print one.
Then I agree. And she also had matching red high heeled sandals.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Again, like it's just kind of funny how like uh they attempt to get sun.
Yes, it's sort of ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh,
Interestingly, I kind of liked what Val was wearing in
oh
Paradise,
yeah.
which I feel like I almost never am like, I really like what Val's wearing.
Mm-hmm.
But like when they were trying to get sun, we don't really get a great visual of like what the bottom of her outfit is, but the top is like a blue and white, like a navy blue and white striped tank top. And I think it must have like blue, like I'm not sure if it's a shorts or a skirt, but under the blanket, I really liked that. And I also liked what she was wearing when they got to Paradise, which we'll talk a little bit more about it in 90s nostalgia, because to me it screams 90s. But she's wearing like a yellow long sleeve like sweater that ties in the front, or I shouldn't call it a sweater, but like a cover up. And then she has like this blue like patterned dress that has flowers and greenery on it. Looks very tropical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What did you think of the outfit Fran wore coming back to New York?
Not practical.
No, especially because it's Christmas time, right?
Exactly. So for those who haven't seen the episode in a while, she's wearing yet another crop topped like tank shirt, and then a matching skirt, short skirt. And it's like this light like floral pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I think over it, she's wearing one of her big puffy fuzzy jackets.
Mm-hmm. I think orange.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was orange or red. But not weather appropriate for New York
Nope.
in December.
Mm-mm. Yeah. Did you have any other fashion you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. How about you?
Okay. Nope.
All right.
So going into notable New Yorkers, I guess, are we sticking with just the episode itself, or are we getting into the flashbacks? Because the flashbacks have a lot. So how do you want to do this?
I just did it with the episode proper.
Yeah, okay.
You already
That
talked about
that
the notable
that yeah. That narrows things down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
In which case, but only
so
like a handful, I think.
yeah. So again, I mean, Bahama Mamas are a type of drink.
Do you know
Um,
what's in a Bahama Mama?
isn't it like Rum?
Yes, I had no
Okay.
idea, so I Googled. And
Mhm.
according to our friends at allrecipes.com, it's a tropical rum cocktail that calls for orange and pineapple juices, grenadine syrup, rum, coconut flavored rum, and crushed ice.
Mhm. Um, just as an aside, "Whoa, Nelly" is like an idiom
Yep.
used as kind of an exclamation of surprise. Um,
Or to
did
slow
you look
someone
up
down.
mhm. Did you, look up the RCA dog?
I did. And so I'm going to quote it because I like the phrasing. In 1899, Francis Barrade painted a picture of his brother's dog Nipper listening intently to a wind-up Edison Bell cylinder phonograph. The trademark was registered by Berliner Grammophon for use in the United States on July 10th, 1900.
Cool.
And that's according to our friends at RCA.com.
Mhm.
They also talk
Did you
about,
put sorry, go ahead.
let's talk about another dog named Chipper, but go ahead.
Mhm. Did you put down Pottery Barn
I
by any
did.
chance? Okay.
It's a home furnishing store that's headquartered in San Francisco that is part of the Williams-Sonoma family. That's according to our
Mhm.
friends at potterybarn.com.
Yeah, and as the reference to it may have indicated, it's very popular for, like, wedding registries and stuff,
Correct.
and baby showers.
That's the one I think
Um
of. I think of baby showers instead of
mhm.
weddings, but yeah,
Yeah. Um, you didn't put, like, "God Bless America," did you?
I did not, but I did put Niall's comment about keeping Cece's nose so bright and guiding his sleigh that night.
Yeah.
That's a reference to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Mhm. Yep. Um, again, when we eliminate the flashbacks, it's not as whatever. Is the next one you have I'm just trying to think because obviously whenever they're doing the shadow puppet, do you have
Yep,
anything prior to that?
just
Oh wait,
one.
okay.
The Macarena.
Oh yeah.
So the
Mm-hmm.
Macarena is a song by Los Del Rio on their 1993 album A Mi Me Gusta, which got remixed then by the Bayside Boys to inspire a dance craze that began in the latter half of 1996. That's according to our
Mm-hmm.
friends at Wikipedia. I don't know about you, but I remember doing the Macarena in front of the computer. So
Yeah. We learned it in gym.
really?
Yes. Yes. Um, so when they're doing shadow puppets, Fran guesses it's Celia Ward from Sisters.
Yep. Celia Ward uh, is an American actress who is known for her role as Teddy Reed on Sisters, and Sisters was an American drama that aired on NBC in the 1990s about four sisters living in Illinois. Both of those are according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any more references?
I do not.
Okay. Yeah. Like it really was not that much in the episode proper itself.
Correct.
What about some Yudishikop?
So also not that much. So the first thing is where Sylvia tells Maxwell to stop being such a Gentile. Gentle is a non-Jewish person.
Mm-hmm.
We have in the fictitious wedding, as I put it in my notes, we have an officiant who could be a rabbi. It's basically a guy wrapped in a tallis or talit. That's the prayer shawl he's wearing. He has a kippah or a yarmulke on his head. That's the skull cap. And he says to them, Mazel Tov, which is as Fran put it in a prior episode, that's pip pip in Yiddish. But really it means like congratulations or good luck.
Mm-hmm.
And I will just mention, we'll talk about this at a later date on a later episode, but one thing that is not required for a Jewish wedding is actually a rabbi.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, you need an officiant for it to be, legal with the state and all
Mm-hmm.
that, but
Yeah.
you don't necessarily need a rabbi for a Jewish wedding ceremony to take place. But we'll talk about that later. And then finally, I just want to point out that in the penultimate scene, when Fran comes in, we see in the two windows, the windows on either side of the door, we see the blue lights. There are two electric menorahs in the Sheffield windows.
Aw.
And And which number one's great. And number two, I just want to point out, because I personally find this interesting, that there's actually a split in rabbinic authority about whether they actually count as being Hanukkahs. So the reason is because the fuel, which would traditionally be oil or a wax candle or another type of candle, whatever, is not like doled out. It's not measured out. The fuel is like created as it's needed. So it doesn't really count as a Hanukkah. That said, however, most rabbis would say that if a traditional Hanukkah was unavailable, meaning like you couldn't find the candles, you couldn't find oil, you lived in a place where that would be like a severe fire hazard, like for example, a dorm room. I know when I was in college, we couldn't, we weren't allowed to have open flames. So most rabbis would say in those circumstances, if a traditional Hanukkah is unavailable, an electric one is better than nothing, because the mitzvah, the deed you're supposed to do to celebrate, is you're supposed to share the light. You're supposed to light what people would call the menorah. So yeah.
Interesting.
Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Excellent.
So 90s nostalgia. The brochure that Fran has. Obviously, brochures still exist, but you would think that she would be just, looking online for her destination, right?
Correct. I agree. How about his old cell phone?
Yep, that's what I was thinking too.
Also, not even just that it's an old looking cell phone, but the fact that she was able to like drop it in her purse without him noticing.
Because he's not as attached to it.
Correct.
Yep. It was interesting. Again, radio still exists, and during inclement weather, yes, people listen to the radio. But also, I think like this day and age, like Maxwell would be like on the internet or have his TV blasting like with the up-to-date information on the hurricane as it's hitting shore.
Agreed. I mentioned this before in favorite fashion, but Val's original Vacation Ensemble to me looked very 90s with the ruffles and the pattern. I like it, but looked very 90s to me.
Yep. Do you have anything else?
I want to say old cars, but I truly didn't note it down, so I'm not certain.
Okay. Yeah. I do have a question.
Sure.
Whether or not the fake wedding kiss counts.
No.
Oh, darn it.
I don't think so. I mean, I want to count it too, but no. It's sort of like when Fran dreamt she and Maxwell kissed. I don't think we can count it.
That's fair. What about, does Fran referencing passive aggressively about when someone can't commit? Well, she never says about taking it back, right?
True.
Well, I guess not. So then now it's time for future fun then.
I love how you just were like, well, I guess it's time for future fun. Let's just move on.
Yes.
So I have two that came to mind. The first is that as we've seen before, we will clearly continue seeing, Niles is very good at torturing Cece. And he will continue screwing with her head throughout the series. At one point, I won't explain why. I won't explain why on the show, but I believe it was because the actress who played Cece had a baby, so she was like on leave. Her character got institutionalized because something very big happened in the Sheffield home and she could not handle it.
Wow.
Niles visits her, and I put that in air quotes because she doesn't actually see him, but instead she hears his voice reminding her that Maxwell loves Fran, and that I think also that she's going to die old and alone.
Wow. Niles is committed.
He is very committed. And of course, after she's out of the institution, she of course she says that she's gonna, sue. She's like, I'm fine, like I'm gonna sue all those guys. But when she finds out that Niles, was the one saying those things to her, she's like, you did come and visit me, you old softy. Exactly. Not necessarily the reaction one would expect. He also sends her a not so nice get well card, and he asks Maxwell to sign it, and Maxwell reads it and he's like, oh, I see what you're doing. It's you're trying to provide some sense of normalcy for her. Got it. Okay. It's like they have their own little ecosystem. It's crazy. And then the other one is, as we learn in season 5, Fran has a dream of becoming a weather girl. And when she actually goes out to try to make her dream a reality, Maxwell is, shall we say, less than supportive. Fran actually ends up getting to go to a news station based on Yetta's, I think he's then Yetta's fiance, because yes, Yetta gets engaged. Whose grandson, nephew, some relative is Brian Gumble, I think. So anyway, fun things in the future. By the way, Fran does not become a weather girl. They did not have an opening for a weather girl when she was there, and so they asked her if she wanted to audition to be a like an editorialist, I guess. And she was asked about her opinion on gene therapy. And she talked about how a great pair of genes is the best form of therapy.
Oh my goodness.
Needless to say, she did not get the job.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Are we up to our episode ratings?
We are indeed.
Is it my turn?
Nope, it's my turn.
Oh, thank God.
So, I was just gonna say, is it my turn? I think it's my turn.
Let's say it's your turn. Is it my turn?
Yeah, because it's episode 11. Yeah, it's my turn. I was a little worried when I noticed it was a clip show, just because I was like, okay, is this gonna be like entertaining enough and stuff? But actually, I enjoyed it. Like, we got to see, like you said, some quintessential iconic scenes in it, and we got that fake wedding. So I'm giving it a 4.5. How about you?
That's interesting. So as you were talking about, you got a little nervous that it was a clip show and was it going to be good enough? I went back to season 3 where we had our last clip show, which was Where's Fran? I gave it a 5. You gave it a 4. So I'm impressed to see that it did better than that episode. I like this episode. It is fun to watch. It's engaging. It's entertaining. As a minor point of pride, I was able to identify almost every one of the flashbacks without going back to my notes. There was only one that I needed my notes for. And that was the scene with the hot kettle. And I was like, I know this is in my notes somewhere. But the rest of them, I think I was able to identify all on my own. I'm going to give it a 4. Because there are just some things about it that don't really make a lot of sense. I'm pretty sure hurricane season's over in like November, not December.
Yeah.
So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I feel like instead of having the clips, it would have been better for us to hear how, for example, Maxwell and Sylvia's discussion went, where she's like, make an exception. How often am I here? Like, why won't you marry my daughter already?
Yeah.
I also would have liked to see like what happened after the last scene in Paradise, like how Fran and Val got from being basically wet rats to Fran arriving at the Sheffield home totally, primped and ready for the rest of the day.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, again, it was entertaining and I obviously enjoyed it. Like you can tell from the sound of my voice that I've enjoyed watching it and I've enjoyed discussing it with you. So
Mhm. Yeah.
pretty good
I
there.
was just thinking back to that scene where Maxwell's like, "No one will know how I feel." And he's like, "No one would know." And then he's like, "Hello." But yeah.
Um,
Okay.
sorry, just on that point, I'm going to throw in one more piece of future fun.
Mhm.
Next week, Fran's going to quit her job, and Maxwell is going to acknowledge to Niles what the thing is, but he doesn't. He tells Niles that he told Miss Fine he loved her and then took it back, and Niles is like, "Oh my God, that's the thing, isn't it? Oh, I could kick you in the seat of the pants."
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yep.
we've got some good stuff coming our way. So,
Nice.
is
Yeah.
there
Anything? Yeah, I
oh,
was gonna say, is there anything else you wanted to talk about regarding this episode?
I don't think so. Do you have anything?
I do not.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 87, Danny's Dead and Who's Got the Will.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.